Mr. Boghossian, welcome back. Good
Thanks,
to see you again,
thanks.
sir.
Good to be here. Thanks.
Mr. Lindsay,
Good to be
James
here.
or Jim, depending upon preferences.
That's right. Go with Jim.
First of all, gentlemen, and there was one other person that you did this with, this whole project.
Helen Pluckrose from England.
Shout out to Helen from England.
Thanks.
She back across the pond right now?
She's across the pond. She's
fish and chips. And
she's making tea and managing
Fish and
Ariel
chips.
magazine.
That's right.
Excellent. All right. Well, shout out to her as well. Let's explain what you guys did and what's so significant about it, because when I first read it, my first inclination, I had two reactions. One was a huge laugh. I laughed really hard. And then I said, thank God somebody exposed this.
Yep.
Yeah.
So tell me what you guys did.
Jim, go for it.
Yeah. So
Well, let's explain who you guys are and what you do.
okay. Yeah.
Okay.
My background is in mathematics. I bailed out on academia in 2010, though, because I kind of see the writing on the wall. And so now I am a renegade gender scholar, and I write nonsense about genitals. That's primarily what I do. I mean, I manage a business at home, so I got out of academia.
Yeah, and I teach philosophy at Portland State University, and I met Jim years ago. We collaborated, and we've written a number of things over the years, and at some point it just came to be we had to do something about this. It was just too ridiculous, and it was translating into the real world, and so we collaborated, and here we are.
Well, let's explain what you did and what was ridiculous. What we're talking about, what was ridiculous, is there's many fields of studies that you can get legitimate degrees in that are absolutely preposterous.
Right.
Literally filled with nonsense,
Right.
taught by nonsense people
Yep.
who live in these nonsense bubbles.
Right.
And then they give these degrees, and these people go out in the real world.
Exactly.
And they infect things.
Yep.
Their ridiculousness infects certain, particularly tech industry businesses.
Yep.
Like you see it infecting.
Damore, James
Mhm,
Damore.
Yeah. Well, let's explain what you guys did.
Yeah, so we started about a year and a half ago now. It was last summer. We started writing a bunch of academic papers for the journals that represent these fields. And so everybody understands what an academic paper is getting out of the gate. This isn't like an op-ed that you dash off for like Washington Post or some magazine or whatever. This is a thing like academics work their careers to write one or two of these a year.
Yeah.
And so they're really hard to write. They're supposed to be hard to get published. So we wrote 20 of them in 10 months. And 7 of those got accepted. 4 were actually published. And
Then we got
at least
busted.
4 more. Yeah, we got busted. And
Yeah.
at least 4 more were on track. Maybe 5 or 6 more would have gotten in.
What's the difference between getting accepted and getting published?
So the process with everything in academia is really slow, and a lot of people don't know this. So you send off this article, the editor looks at it, and the editor either gives it the thumbs up or the thumbs down. If they give it the thumbs up, it goes off to peer reviewers, and that process takes months, often as long as, we had one paper that was 8 months under peer review. So the reviewers look at it, they try to figure out if the arguments are good, they try to figure out if the research is good, they evaluate that, they give extensive comments, they send it back to you, then you have to revise it according to whatever they say, make it better is what's supposed to happen. They made ours crazier. And so then they did every single time.
We took the feedback and made the papers just the most extreme thing.
Extreme things. And so then you send them back. So now you're probably 3-4 months in just to the review process, not to the writing, which should also take months.
Yeah.
And then the editor will either send it back to the reviewers to see if it was good enough, or they'll just evaluate it themselves depending on where it stands. And then they'll make a decision as to whether or not to accept it or reject it or ask for more revisions. And then when they accept it, that means the journal's ready to publish it. But then the publishing process requires all the typesetting, proofing, all the stuff that goes into making it professional for an academic journal. And that can take months.
And publishing is the coin of the realm. Like, that's it. So the ideal is one paper every year in the humanities broadly. So that's how you credential yourself. That's how you get tenure, which is a job for life. That's how you get to teach people these ideas who then, as you said, go out into the workforce, 5-6 years later and infect everybody with total silliness. So it's the gold standard peer review. So we saw a tremendous problem.
Can we tell people some of the titles of these
Sure.
articles? Because right now they're like, what the hell are these guys talking about?
So we had an article. The one that got the most press was about dog humping in Portland, Oregon. It was called. How did it go? Was it called queer performativity and was it rape culture?
Rape culture
And queer performativity in dog parks in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, we claim to have examined under a fake name.
Is that
all
a real
fake
word?
names.
Performativity?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, they have their own lingo, their own,
But is that a word in the English language? Performativity?
I mean, in the academic English language,
yeah.
not in common parlance. But that's like the whole thing. This is huge, right? This goes back
Right.
a long way. That's Judith Butler's whole thing was that
Who's
gender is
Judith
performed.
Butler?
Judith Butler is probably the most influential feminist scholar, or gender scholar, actually, I should say, that's been in maybe the last 30 years. She's big time. And so she had this whole thing that gender is performative. It's something you perform. It's not something that has anything to do with your biology.
Retracted article.
Oh, yeah, there
Human
it is.
reactions to rape culture and queer performativity at urban dog parks in Portland, Oregon. Why is it retracted?
Because it's
Because they realized
it's
that you
bogus.
guys were hosing them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Human
we-
reactions to rape culture and queer performativity.
we claim to have closely examined the genitals of
just under 10,000
just
dogs.
under 10,000 dogs, and then interrogated their owners as to their sexual orientation.
So we checked out the dog's nuts and then said, "Excuse me, sir, are you gay?"
Yeah.
And you
So
asked
that's-
them if they gendered their dogs.
Yeah, well, we made up these totally insane, dogs humping incidents and how they beat female dogs, but they didn't beat male dogs. So that's one of the papers that we made. The other paper that
Well,
we
with
wrote,
this one also, they had the whole thing like if a male dog humps another male dog, especially men would freak out and break it up.
Yeah.
Stop that because that's the queer performativity part.
Yeah.
But then if a male dog humped a female dog, they'd be like, get her, girl. Or,
Yeah.
Get her, get on it.
So you're basically raging against
That's
heteronormativity.
exactly correct. We told them exactly what they wanted to hear, and we gave them bogus statistics to fuel what they already wanted to believe.
Yeah, we started off with the idea that what we wanted to get to was a conclusion, and then we made up all the crap in between
Yeah.
to get to it. And the conclusion was feminism should train men the way we train dogs so that we can get rid of rape culture.
Put them on leashes.
Yeah.
It's right in the paper. It's all
is.
there. Unfortunately, we cannot put men on leashes. It's not politically feasible to put men on leashes.
You guys wrote that?
Yeah.
Yeah, they
or to
publish
yank
it.
their leashes when they misbehave.
Yeah.
And this paper didn't just get published. The journal said that this was exemplary scholarship and gave it an award. Says one of the
Oh my God.
says one of the best pieces. It's this year is their 25th anniversary. So this journal's been doing this for 25 years.
Yeah.
And it's their 25th anniversary, so they're picking out the best papers throughout the whole
Exemplary.
year
Yeah.
and putting them, pride a place in some issue of their journal. And ours was going to be in the 7th issue. Was
So
gonna
it
be the number
either
one.
is great or it's not great. So it either is great or it's not great. Like, why are they retracting it?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
because they know we're bogus.
So what? You were right.
Well,
it's like a broken clock.
Yeah.
The clock's broken,
Well-
but it is actually 12 o'clock.
so they would claim it's incorrectly that we fabricated statistics, but we wrote other papers called, one was fat bodybuilding. So they claim that there should be a category introduced in traditional bodybuilding called fat bodybuilding, where people come and display their fat before the audience. And we didn't manufacture any statistics for that, and they love that. They thought it. One line in that paper was a fat body is a built body, and one of the reviewers was like,
I wholeheartedly agree, or something like that.
Oh, Jesus
so we want
Christ.
to, yeah. And then we wrote other papers like to Hypatia. We published got accepted, not published, but that one we claim that it's unacceptable.
It's unethical to make fun of anything to do with social justice.
Right.
And so if you want to make fun of things that don't have anything to do with social justice, that's good. So if we wanted to make fun of men, that's great. If you want to make fun of white people, that's great. If you want to make fun of anything to do with social justice, that's a problem. So
Right.
we said that, South Park's a huge problem. The Simpsons is a huge problem. We went into talking about how Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart have the right idea, but then the journal was like, but they're straight white males, so you have to, nuance around that
Right.
to make it clear that their position as white men, even though they're on the side of social justice, it's not quite good enough,
So they published that.
They published that.
They published that.
What was that? What was that one called?
That one was called When the Joke's on You.
Yeah. And we wrote it so that they would think the joke is on us because we cited our own work in there.
Right.
But the
Yeah.
joke was actually on them for publishing it.
Yep.
Yeah. Duh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This it's so funny how racist you can be as long as you're racist against white people.
That's what we saw, is that as long as you are going up the river against privilege, then you can really just get away with some nasty stuff.
Yeah, and you could generalize.
Oh, totally.
Gross generalizations.
Gross generalizations.
Do not treat people as individuals.
Absolutely.
Nope.
It's very strange. It's very strange that this is the left. You know, I was a kid in San Francisco in the 1970s. We lived in, you know, like there was the hippie times, and I lived there from age 7 to 11, and it kind of formed a lot of my opinions about people, like the who gives a shit part of my appreciation for any group, whatever it is, whether it's race or gender or sexual orientation, and I don't understand it from either way. I certainly don't understand it from a racist perspective, but I really don't understand it from racism that's condoned because it's racism against white people.
Oh, yeah.
That this is the left. These are the people that are preaching against hate. Mm-hmm. And these are the people that used to be the people that were supposedly so open-minded and so open to ideas, and now they're trying to stifle creativity and stifle dissent and stifle anything that doesn't fit inside that very narrow paradigm that they're trying to push. It's very strange.
Yeah, they co-opted the civil rights movement. The good name of the civil rights movement is kind of the brand that they ride on. You know, they're fighting against racism. They're fighting against sexism, misogyny, etc. And the thing is that's not really what's going on here. They've actually tapped into this, to throw around the term, this postmodern notion that everything in society has to do with power dynamics, and the power dynamics have to be understood in terms of groups and how those groups have traditionally held power and exercised power. And so immediately it becomes stuck in this idea that it's all about this group or that group and how they relate to one another. And I don't mean like, hey, let's get along relate. I mean like white people are imagined to always be over black people, and therefore, you know, there's always this natural power dynamic of oppressor versus oppressed. And this is stuff that came straight out of this weird postmodern philosophy where you saw these dissatisfied French philosophers in the 60s, you know, all this stuff you were talking about was going down. They saw all this stuff and they said, wow, you know, okay, power dynamics are the thing. Because I should go back a step. The postmodern philosophers like Foucault and all of this got all hooked up on power because they were dissatisfied with seeing what they called grand narratives, Christianity, capitalism, Marxism. They saw all these huge, you know, explanations for how the world works and said, you know, they're not working. Look how bad communism failed. Look how there's so much, you know, bullshit coming out of this or that from religion. It's not working. We need to just get rid of all of it. We're going to deconstruct this. We're going to break it down to its power dynamics. And then we're going to look at it in terms of who has masterhood over who's oppressing what, where's dominance. And it's just kind of grown. It got picked up in the academic culture in the 1960s. That's how old this stuff is. And then it took this huge turn in the 1990s and got really vicious, and that's where it really got, you know, that's when it turned intersectional, actually.
That was during the politically correct days?
That's when the political correct thing kind of blew up, yeah, is when all this stuff was coming out. So that would have been, you know, late 1980s is really when all of this political correctness stuff started coming out of the academy, and then a few years later you see it coming all over politics, which is typically what happens. It starts in the academy, a few years later it leaks into the culture.
Right.
And politics or media or the tech sector now, whatever it happens to be.
The stifling of creativity is the most disturbing part about it. Like the agreement that South Park and The Simpsons are a real problem. It's so bizarre because, like, here's the thing: if they miss the mark and it's not funny, it won't work, and then it'll be a bad show and no one will like it. But if it's funny, there has to be something about it that people find ironic, satirical. There has to be something about it that people are enjoying that has to point to some truth.
Yep.
And the denial of this, and instead, like the saying, oh, it's white males that are causing this problem and you shouldn't attack this or that, or, you know, there's subjects that are off limits and social justice should never be attacked. Like, to agree to that, it's so preposterous. This is life we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is literally the nuance of life, all the various strange things in the spectrum of human behavior and all the things you encounter in life. And to segment and limit what is and is not, what's off limits and it's not off limits based on race, based on things that a person can't control at all. You're just born white. So if you're born white, you're born an oppressor.
Right.
You're born
Exactly.
a victimizer. And if you're a white male, you're a fucking piece of shit.
Right.
And you can say that.
White hetero male in particular.
Oh,
Yeah.
God. I mean, I've seen so many tweets from people. I mean, so many virtue signaling tweets. But one of my favorite ones is this feminist who said, all white straight men are trash unless proven otherwise.
Yeah, that's the thing, right?
All of us.
All of us.
All of us.
All of
There's
us.
150 million of us. I mean, give or take, you know how many gay folks there are?
Yeah, trash.
Yeah. Trash!
No problem. Prove
Unless proven otherwise.
And prove you're not, right?
Yeah.
How do you do that? That's
you
like
gotta
witch
be
trials.
an ally. You have to be an ally.
Oh, no, they asked us to problematize allyship, too. You see, there's power dynamics. Once you say, hey, I'm an ally, now you've made it so that you have like a shield where people can't call you a white supremacist anymore. And you are acting on behalf of other people and you're speaking for them, so you now have assumed power, you're reproducing the same power dynamics.
Right. That was the Mein Kampf paper.
Yeah, our paper that rewrote Mein Kampf actually
We had
was
two-
about allyship, and they were like, you didn't problematize allyship.
Yeah, we had two of them that did Mein Kampf. One of them we just more or less replaced replaced Jews with white men. And you
literally took Mein Kampf, the actual words from Mein Kampf, and put it in this paper and replaced the word Jews with the word white men, and they accepted it.
Well, we had two papers that did Mein Kampf.
Yeah.
We had two versions.
So that one did not get accepted.
That one did not.
What were the quotes that you guys used?
I mean, so with that one, what we did was we took the whole document online and we just searched the word Jew. And we just started picking sentences and paragraphs. So what was it? That at the end it was something like, if we don't combat whiteness, it's going to be the funeral wreath for mankind. That's straight out of Mein Kampf. Now they didn't they didn't accept that paper though, because that paper turns out was written from the perspective of a white lesbian who hated her own whiteness, and they said that it was positioning her as a good white, and because she's making herself out as a good white, again, allyship isn't as all it's cracked up to be. She, was making a problem. She should have really been forwarding the ideas of the black scholars that she read way more and not talking about herself so much, even though it was a paper designed to be talking about herself.
Yeah, because that was what Hitler did, so that's what we had to do.
Yeah. Now, the other Mein Kampf paper was about feminism, and what we did was we took the chapter, it's chapter 12, we took the chapter where he says this is why we should have the Nazi Party and what is expected of people who are going to be part of it. And we took out our movement or party. He didn't call it a Nazi party in the chapter, but everywhere he's like, our movement. Took that out, put in intersectional feminism. And then modified the words and added theory around it so that it would fly. And
Theory?
Yeah, theory. That's what they call it.
I love that word.
Yeah, theory.
I love when feminist theory. I love when they throw that around. Like, what are you saying? But you're saying things that, like, once you say that, you're good. Like you can say something ridiculous and then say feminist theory, and they're like, "Oh, it's in feminist theory."
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is so much of the stuff they come up with. Let me throw them an olive branch. Like so much of the stuff they come up with is a creative idea. Maybe there's something to some of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But what they're putting forward is hypotheses, and then they're treating them as conclusions. So they're putting forward this idea. I saw one on Twitter today. It was something like, it was about South Park, how it's been laundering racism into society and making everybody comfortable with racism. And that's why everything's so racist and people are shooting Jews, is because South Park made it normal. But they're treating that as a conclusion, but that's a hypothesis, right? So we could test that. It's conceivable that you could actually try to parse out what variables need to be controlled, see, South Park came out, it started doing these themes, how does it track? Statisticians can do kind of amazing things with that stuff, but they're not doing that. They're not testing it. Instead of testing it, they're concluding it, and they're using theory to do so.
And they're go ahead.
No, it's even bigger than that, because why don't they test it? Well, if they tested it, and I'm not making this shit up, you won't believe me, but this is true. If they tested it and the test showed that their hypothesis was wrong, they would say that the test was racist.
Right.
That the test is condoning racism, and that's why it didn't give them the desired result.
How would you test something like that?
Because
I mean, I'm not a statistician. I'm actually a mathematician, but I'm not a statistician. They're two different things. So I'm not exactly sure how you would test that. But conceivably, you could gather data, survey data, and see how attitudes have changed. Maybe you could track kinds of articles, kinds of events that are coming out. You could kind of pair that up with what's been shown on South Park.
Yeah, who watched South Park and track that with attitudes. I mean,
Yeah,
you
but
could,
there's no effort to do this. They're like, oh, South Park presents these ideas, which they then cherry pick because there's other ideas that they don't talk about that are, point the other direction. These ideas are problematic. That's the big word. Theoretically, that's a problem. Why? Because and I'm not joking, they literally believe that use of language creates the power dynamics that define society. So South Park's using language and imagery that creates a power dynamic that makes people more comfortable being racist. Boom. Theory. Done.
Right.
No
So
test needed. No even attempt test. And then if the test happened, the test itself would be racist unless it confirmed the hypothesis.
Right. So they start with an agenda, and then you mentioned the word laundering, which is good. Your former guest, Brett and Heather, talked about idea laundering. I think that's important for the listeners.
Yeah. So that's what's going on here is they're forwarding these hypotheses. They don't treat them as hypotheses, and then they write up a paper. Paper, like we were saying, is the absolute gold standard of academic work. They send the paper off. The reviewers, in our cases, made our papers crazier every single time. So they push it further into the ideology or the madness.
How does a reviewer do something like that? What input do they get to have?
They said, for example, that we should problematize allyship. If we want our paper published, we've got to problematize allyship.
I love that word, problematize.
Yeah.
It's another word
Everything. Problematize everything. Dog parks, problematize everything. Problematize. Literally anything can be problematized and looked at through a feminist lens.
It's such
they
a great
problematize
word.
everything. Everything. The whole world's a fucking
their
problem.
tool. That's why we called it grievance studies. The whole world's a problem.
It's a grievance. They're massively okay. So then, but the transphobia.
Yeah,
thing.
the trans paper. So we wrote this paper saying that straight men are generally transphobic, meaning in particular the kind of niche, weird definition that you see on the internet and activists sometimes, that they aren't interested in having sex with trans people who have penises, trans women who have a penis in particular. And so we said that, well, that's a kind of transphobia, and clearly the reason that they might be transphobic is because they don't practice putting things in their butts. So if they start putting stuff up their butts, in particular, we called the paper dildos. So you can imagine what we were saying, they should put up their butts.
The whole paper was called dildos?
No, that was the nickname we gave it. The paper was called Going In Through the Back Door.
Really?
Yeah,
Really?
Yeah.
Going in through the back door.
And we
and then there's a
argued
lot
that
of
you
technical
can-
words.
Did that one get published?
Yeah, that's you can
published.
see it online. You can see it online. So we argued that if straight men just penetrated themselves and had their girlfriends peg them through exposure therapy, you start small and then work your way up, you can remediate transphobia.
Yeah, we'll make them less transphobic.
So
As
by
a result.
self-penetrating or having your girlfriend peg you, you can be less transphobic. And they thought this is a great idea.
And so we based this off of 8 interviews, really 13 interviews, but with men. And I say really 13. There were 13 interviews documented, but 5 of them were with gay people, not even straight people. So they don't really apply. So then we have these 8 interviews with straight men. We made one of them a conservative. And he's just, so we could just put in crazy things that a conservative might say about this. And they were like, why weren't there more conservatives participating? So I was like, well, I'm going to run with this. And I wrote this whole thing. We invited 6 conservatives to participate, and only 1 accepted. And to kind of summarize why, and this is in the paper, in the words of one, I don't want to be a part of some stupid liberal study about shoving things up your butt.
And they published
that.
Boom, right in.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
So we wrote
Here it is. Retracted article.
Yep. Going in through the back door, right there.
Oh, my God. Now, did they contact you after they retract your article? They go, hey, you guys are fucking assholes. You're wasting our time. We spent hours reviewing your papers.
We got a couple of pretty bitter responses, but mostly no. Mostly they've kind of put their head in the sand and kind of avoided talking to us.